So yeah, there I was in the middle of the Pacific on a ship, dead in the water. Find out what happens next. This is a Saipan Sailor, and this is Fire in the Yukon, Part 4. All right. I left off standing outside, facing aft, looking at what used to be the stack, but was just a jagged hole. Immediately, I just wanted to get away from the engine room. So I went down the stairs. There's only one deck down to the main deck. And I don't know what drew me to the starboard side, but that's where I went. I went over to the starboard side. When I came around the side of the house, I looked forward and I seen the bosun standing there. And I raised my hand like, what the hell happened? And he just hunched his shoulders as if to say, I don't know, what are you asking me for? Well, when I looked down, we were both standing on the tank top. And the deck had raised about 2 feet at least, 3 feet like a bubble. And the lifeboat davit, that was the only thing there, was all twisted and mangled, and that lifeboat had broken free of the gripes and the tricing pendant on one end, and was just hanging there over the side on the other end. Or rather, I think it was just hanging there on the deck. Either way, that lifeboat was useless. Well, we heard some yelling coming from up on the bridge wing. Now the bridge wing, if you don't know what it is, it's just a superstructure that extends out on both sides of the wheelhouse on the outside. And you walk out there and they could stand watch and they could look over the side, and they have some access, some controls there too. But these guys were up there yelling down at us that they couldn't get down. And we're like, what do you mean you can't get down? Well, this passageway was full of smoke, and they didn't want to bother going through it. It was maybe 4 or 5 decks. So what they had done is they found some rope, and they lowered each other down in either a bosun's chair or a French bull, and I think they tied a French bull in. And I guess the captain was the last guy, and he repelled himself down somehow. So everybody started to gather right there. And we all just, the captain said, let's go up forward to the bow. Well, we got up to the bow, and I started looking around, kind of taking a head count, and I noticed that, well, I knew the 2 guys that were on watch weren't going to be there. The 2 engine guys. But where was the first engineer and the chief engineer? I didn't see them anywhere. But when I looked down, there was these 2 fellows on the deck that were just covered with silt, and they were still kind of in a daze, shell shock. That was the first and the chief. Apparently they've been outside on the main deck when that tank went off. They were probably watching those guys cut the stores crane up. We knew there was nothing we could do. This ship was dead. Nobody was going near the engine room. It was hopeless. I don't even know if the CO2 system went off or even if it worked. I don't know. One thing we could do was go back on the port side and get that lifeboat in the water, and they had a few rafts back there, and bring them forward. So myself, one of the engineers, whom he was a third assistant, and years later he and I also sailed together on another tanker. We went back there with the bosun and lowered the boat in water, threw the Jacob's ladder over, climbed in a boat, and brought it forward with a raft. And of course the engine was seized up in the lifeboat, probably from running it without jacket water all those years. So they lowered another Jacob's ladder on the bow. We got the boat tied up in the raft, climbed back on board. The captain said, we're comfortable right here, right now. Let's just sit here a while. And I think what he was trying to do was pretty much let all this sink in everyone's mind, you know, and hopefully give everyone some time to calm down and think things over, you know. About that time, it must have been, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock maybe in the afternoon. Every now and then I'd be looking aft, and every now and then I'd hear boom, and something goes shooting off in the sky. And what that was those empty barrels on the stack deck. They were exploding one by one and going off. When dusk came around, it started to get dark, and we could see flames coming around each side of the house. So that's when the captain said, all right, let's go. And he ordered everybody in the lifeboat and in the raft. Now, I don't know if I mentioned, there were, I think, maybe a dozen, more or less, guys that were hired to clean the tanks, the cargo tanks, Butterworth in the tanks. They were a crew from Japan. And so the only one of those guys that spoke English was their foreman. And so they were with us. So 30 of us were in the lifeboat, 3 guys in a raft. We cut loose and drifted away from the ship. My cigar went out. Now I gotta tell you, those lifeboats are not built for comfort. One look and you'll agree. This was the old type. It was open, just an oversized skiff is really all it is. The rafts are comfortable. So nobody slept. And the only thing we had in that boat to eat and drink were little packets of water and these biscuits that came with the lifeboat. And who knows how many years they've been sitting there. But it was still edible. And so before we knew it, it was pitch black. Okay, it was nighttime. And it wasn't long before a Coast Guard C-130 had found us and started circling around as if to let us know, we got you covered, don't worry, you know. We got you. And they dropped off a couple more rafts and some supplies, but we never went out to retrieve them. Somehow we knew in the morning we'd get rescued. Sure enough, seems like as soon as the sun started coming up, right at dawn, this Japanese fishing boat came up alongside. They took us on board, and that Butterworth crew foreman, they translated for us. He said, captain of that ship told him, there's a German container, they were headed for U.S. waters, but there was a German container ship headed for Japan, and they would come and pick us up. We could spend the night on that ship, and they would drop us off at Midway Island. So we waited, while we waited for a German container ship, they gave us noodles and biscuits or bread and cigarettes, water. And we kind of took it easy until that German ship showed up with their lifeboat, and they took us over there and we climbed on board. And that German ship had a Filipino crew. And just like us, they were seamen, and just like us, they were party animals. And so we partied, drank, did whatever with those guys overnight. And the next morning, we came up on Midway Island, and a boat came out and took us to the island. Now I'm going to stop right there because the story is about to change. So stay tuned for part 5. This is the Saipan Sailor. Clear skies and calm seas, everybody.